Hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Palace Ep003. The first Premier League game of the season has been and gone. The transfer window continues in full flow. And did Eze say his goodbyes? All that and more with the one, the only Henry Swain. Yet again, how are you doing, mate?
I'm okay. Been a busy morning. Enjoyed the game. I'm sure we're going to get onto that. But yeah, I'm doing well.
Good to hear, man. Good to hear. Of course, this week is crazy. The first week of European football for us as well. So there is a lot to dive into. And to be fair, we'll go straight in. Chelsea away. Really solid point, wasn't it, mate? And yeah, just talk us through what you felt about the whole game as a whole.
Yeah, watching it on TV. We played well. We looked good. I know we were saying last week that, it's one of those where you wouldn't really be disappointed or upset if we lost. But we looked great. We defended superbly. I think, we were pretty dominant for large parts of the game, especially in the first half. And then I wouldn't say rode our luck, but we just defended so resolutely, in the final 15, 20 minutes or so. And it was just great to see, we just seem to be going from strength to strength in terms of our general team performance. Obviously, there were individual standouts, but if you'd offered us a point before the game, you'd probably take it. And we're the first team to stop Chelsea scoring at Stamford Bridge in the entire calendar year. So that's an achievement in itself. We've frustrated them. I think Glasner's also the first manager to not lose against Chelsea in 3 consecutive games. So there's so many positives to take.
Yeah, massively. So many positives, as you said. For me, the defence was so good yesterday, and I'm talking about the whole team defending as well, not just the back five. It just felt like a really solid, everyone putting 110% in terms of the effort. Um, as you just said there about the stats, keeping Chelsea to scoring no goals is a really big achievement. Really didn't have many chances. I feel like Dean Henderson wasn't really ever worried, like maybe the one chance at the end they had. But in terms of them creating big opportunities throughout the game, they just weren't. For me, Lacroix, he got player of the match from Palace's point of view. Superb, wasn't he, mate?
He was so good, so good. And we spoke about how in the Community Shield he was good, but his passing was poor, and it just felt like he kind of just maybe needed a game to get into his rhythm. Because I thought his passing out from the back was good. I enjoyed that he was bypassing the midfield quite a lot and just passing straight to Mateta's feet. We saw the stats from Achiampong after the game, and it looked like he'd had a really good game, and I thought he was okay. But I thought for the most part Mateta bullied him completely. And I think a huge part of that was the majority of the balls played up to him were on the floor instead of in the air. His touch, his dribbling has just come on leaps and bounds from 2 years ago, even last year at times. But yeah, Lacroix was superb. I thought defensively brilliant. He's just so quick, and it's such a brilliant tool to have. I mean, for me, that's what makes him a very expensive defender if and when we come to sell him, because it's all well and good being good on the ball and good defensively in terms of your duels and your aerial wins and your passing. But that kind of recovery pace, he was matching players stride for stride constantly. And it was just so good to see.
Yeah, for sure. I thought he had to cover Munoz a lot. He's obviously the central centre back, but I don't know. It just felt like maybe it was a bit of a tactic from Glasner. Lacroix was having to cover Munoz a lot. Munoz wasn't. I'm not complaining. He wasn't tracking back or getting back as much or as quickly. Maybe that was a plan. But yeah, Lacroix would just deal with it every time. Really, it felt like he was so good. And another defender I thought did really well was Mitchell. Looking back as well, especially defensively, really good shift. And when Estavio came on, that's a really hard player to deal with. And yes, there were some times Mitchell did need help. He got that help, but overall, I thought it was pretty solid from him, wasn't it? Defensively, I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, a player like Esteval coming on, I mean, wow, he looks great. He's going to cause a
Yeah.
lot of problems this year. Just so incredibly quick on the ball. But Mitchell did really well, as he did against Salah in the Community Shield. The final point I'll make on the Lacroix situation with Munoz is that I think our system is very much wanting Munoz to stay forward, which is fine. It works. And then the whole idea about having that back five is that they just all shift over. And it might be that Lacroix comes round to play almost as the right back. And then Richard shifts centrally. And then you've got the back four with Guehi and Mitchell as well. But I think just defensively as a whole, the entire team, I think we were bypassed quite easily in midfield at times. I thought Wharton played well. Hughes struggled, I think, to keep up with the pace of the game at times. And I think we also missed Kamada in the sense of when we're on the ball, quickly spraying the ball right and left. We seemed to kind of stutter a bit when we were attacking, and or when there were opportunities to transition. But ultimately, it's just a superb effort from everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And Wharton for me was different gravy. We need more of that. He can pass the ball forward, of course, but agree with you as well there. We needed them other kind of players to do that as well. That's why Kamada's been really good for us lately since he's kind of got back into the starting 11 around April time. And Wharton, my God, this player. I feel like sometimes you can tell if Wharton's not perfect or at his best, but when he is at his best or when he is perfect, it's just like you just have a ridiculous player on our hands. And I mean, the tackling was pretty much superb. The pass forwards, amazing, and positioning, he was just great, wasn't he?
Yeah, he just sees passes that you don't. I mean that through ball to Mateta, when he should have scored there. He kind of just hits it straight at Sanchez, which is quite unlike him actually, not to find a corner with his finishes. But just that pass, he's taken one touch and he's not even looked. He just knows where Mateta is, threads it through three defenders and finds his feet. I mean, it's superb play. And you're right, his passing ability is very good. I think somebody that struggled a bit in the game was Eze. I think he was maybe quite desperate to make an impact, if it was to be his last game. And I thought there was just a couple of times where he made the wrong decision. There was one time where he could have played Mitchell in and he decided to shoot. It wasn't a bad effort, so don't have too many issues with that. But when he chose to shoot from the halfway line, that was a bit silly. And then also, I remember we had a chance to counter attack. I believe in the second half, and he's kind of hit an across ball switch. I assume it intended for Munoz, and he just completely mishit it, and it's kind of curled back and actually ended up playing the Chelsea player in on goal. So yeah, I mean, when you've got a player like Wharton, though, it gives you so many options in terms of how to attack. You can find players that you wouldn't normally be able to find, or that you'd have to play an extra pass to open up the angle, and he can just do it himself. It's just mind blowing. And there was rumours of Man United interest in a 70 million valuation. I mean, that's not even going to scratch the surface of what Adam Wharton's worth, I'm afraid.
Yeah, massively agree. He's going to be the same level of price as Baleba. So I know Man United are linked to him, but there's no way he's going to be going this summer at least. I think even for him, he needs this kind of full season at a club at probably Crystal Palace's level to like push on. I think it won't benefit him moving somewhere else. But yeah, amazing yesterday. And you kind of brought it up during that when you were just talking there as well. Mateta definitely should have scored. And in terms of Palace's performance, I think that was the one small negative of the game that you see him scoring them at the moment. So it was a bit of a shame. I know it was a bit of a snapshot. It was his one big chance, but that would have been a really big moment, wouldn't it? And sadly, he didn't get it. Wharton was amazing in the build-up, like you said. And then obviously the one goal that was actually in the game was a disallowed goal for this 1 meter Guehi too close to the wall rule, basically. So it wasn't to do with him fouling anyone. It's just due to the fact that he was literally closer than 1 meter to the Chelsea wall. Now, of course, it's a rule and you just have to accept rules. But I guess the argument, Henry, is where's the consistency, right?
Well, I don't think it's even where's the consistency. It's more, this rule was introduced 6 years ago in 2019, and this is the first time it's in the Premier League that it's ever disallowed a goal. And I put out a TikTok and chucked it on Twitter as well. Going through, and the examples I went through were, I watched the 20 or whatever it was, however many direct free kick goals there were last season. I think that was 20, and I mean 18 of the 20 had the exact same issue. The exact same thing. The defence didn't complain. I think if the goal stands, nobody even questions it. Nobody speaks about it. But I guess you could speak about consistency because at the end of last season at Stamford Bridge, the same ground, the same end, basically the same position, Bournemouth were the victims of a late goal conceded, and Cucurella was essentially in the wall. I just don't really understand the rules. And then we saw later in the day, Julian Alvarez scored a really nice free kick for Atletico Madrid. And again, players in the wall. It seems to me, and I said this in the video I put up, that they spend all summer getting the rules drilled into their heads, and I don't think in 3 months' time that decision is given, because I don't think it's picked up on. I don't think they even think to look at it. And ultimately, my main argument was that Guehi being that close to the wall, surely the rule is so that an attacking player can't obstruct or disrupt the wall. Guehi just moved out the way. I mean, that's going in regardless, because Sanchez has Poppadom hands, and I can't believe I put him in my fantasy team. But it's gone straight through his hands. And that's, I don't think that Guehi's impact or movement has had any influence on that, that goal being scored. If it had gone over the wall and Guehi had barged into the wall and knocked them off balance and, restricted their ability to jump and block it, I'd understand that. But it didn't. It had no impact on the game, had no impact on the free kick. And ultimately, Palace again find themselves, this time I think more, unfairly on the wrong end of a decision that we've never seen before.
Yeah, it's a really weird one. I think just simply for me, yes, it's technically a rule, but I think the issue at the moment with VAR is they're not trying to intervene for big issues. They're trying to analyze goals and find a reason for them to be disallowed. And I think that's something they've got to sort, because yes, football fans moan about rules and VAR and it should get involved more and stuff. And it is a hard place for them to be. But you also need to understand that you can't just be trying to microscopically analysing every single rule with VAR. That's not really the intention of it. It's just to kind of sort out them big mistakes. And it wasn't a big mistake at the end of the day. So it was a really, really weird one to see, technically, the rules. But yeah, as you said, just we're the first ones to get that punishment for it, even though it's been around since 2019. Anyways, end of the game. We'll talk about Eze first. I was in that away and it looked like a farewell. He stopped, applauded. Yeah, that's normal and stuff. But it was like he was putting his hands together, then putting his hand out to the crowd, like really taking us in, appreciating us. And we appreciated him back, chanted his name and stuff. So it was a big moment. And yeah, it does really feel like a farewell, doesn't it, mate?
Yeah, I mean, it did look that way, although I think Ebbs does kind of tend to do prolonged thanks at the end of games. I'm just not really reading into anything of what we've read, especially seeing as Miguel Delaney, who apparently doesn't like me. He obviously said that Eze and Guehi will not be playing, and then an hour later had that kind of rubbed in his nose and decided to take it out on me. I don't know if people saw. I essentially just called him out for because he highlighted you guys singing the Marinakis chant, or the UEFA chant, I should call it. And but he just mentioned Marinakis' name, similar to how Aaron's did not too long ago. And I kind of just said, like, what is this thing about people pretending they can't hear the rest of the chant? And he came back, oh, you're not in the press box, you can't hear. But I had a friend that was on the opposite side of the ground to you, who's a Palace fan, and could hear every word. So it's just weird, but weird back and forth. And then I think, to be honest, it just proves Glasner's point that you shouldn't believe everything you read. We've seen numerous reports about Eze. I think maybe it feels closer to something happening purely because we've kind of had it rammed down our throats a bit. But if you highlight it, as I've seen you doing on your social media, and I've done as well, and so many Palace fans, these aren't updates. They're just, oh, remember this is going on. And to be honest, it's sad because for me with Fabrizio, all he's doing is trying to make as much money out of his platform as he can, which, fair play to him. I'm sure he's doing really well. But, people get things wrong a lot of the time. And we saw that. That was one of the biggest blunders, I think, in terms of football journalism of the summer, yesterday. To say that the players saying his goodbyes, he categorically will not be involved, only for Palace to drop the team sheet with him on the front of. It makes people look really silly. And I think you could kind of forgive yourselves for thinking he'd gone already, but I think we should just be a bit patient with stuff like that.
I think it's interesting. We've both done like football journalism stuff over the years, and it's just interesting the way that football journalism's going, especially when the transfer window's on. There's a lot of companies out there who are just aggregators who will just care about the clickbait titles because that's how they get their views due to how other sites work. You've got to lead with the big title so people click on it. You're competing with lots of people, and I do understand that. And it's not fun environment to be in sometimes because it is quite a battle over the transfer window. You need the clicks. But it just like, and people's argument was, well, something must have changed last minute. Well, then they shouldn't be jumping the gun. You know, if you don't know that that news is 100% factual, you don't jump the gun. And I think the thing, I may be right. I definitely saw the tweet from Ornstein. I didn't see his full article. So, but when he did his first tweet, when everyone else was breaking Eze is not going to be in the squad or whatever, Ornstein didn't put anything about Eze not being in the squad in the tweet. And I think that's where it's important. You know, you've just got to have he's put in that tweet what he believes is completely right. And I think we're having that gap where some journos are jumping on the news because they see others tweet on it, and that's where it's going. And then they all want to beat each other to it. So it's a crazy line to be in. But yeah, it's getting worse and worse, isn't it? Like what you're saying, we don't trust everything we hear now, but we should be able to trust every journalist we hear, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to be a game of chance, and I think Miguel Delaney, for example, yesterday, not to focus on him, but he was the one that was kind of at the centre of what happened yesterday. He jumped the gun and he took a chance because he thought he had an exclusive, and he turned out to be wrong. And I understand he's backtracked and said, "Oh, things change quickly," and things do change quickly in football. You know that is completely true. You know, I hear a lot of information one day that the next day is either completely changed or it's slightly different or whatever. But what I would say is that you would not put out a story like that unless you had categorically known for a fact that that was going to happen. And if it was going to happen categorically for a fact, it wouldn't have changed. That's not the kind of thing that Glasner's not going to have disruption before a game. He's not going to have Eze come to him and say, look, or the club say, we shouldn't play him today, and then change his mind last minute. That's not how these things work, And I know people sometimes come at me for saying, "Oh, you pretend to know a lot." You don't need to be a genius or in the know to understand that that's not how football transfers and football clubs work. Yes, sometimes a player might be touted for a move and then that changes, or a target changes, or an agreement changes, or a medical fails, etc., etc. But I really struggle to believe that at one point yesterday morning, Eze was absolutely not playing, and then a couple of hours later, he's changed his mind, the club have changed their mind, whatever it be, and he's in the starting 11. That, for me, was just an example of someone jumping the gun, taking a chance, and probably crossing their fingers and hoping that they were right, because it appears to be a good exclusive. And I think you see that a lot of people are in talks with dropping rumors, dropping this, that, and the other, and then if it comes out that it's happened and it's confirmed, you look like a genius, and it improves your reputation. But on the other hand, if you don't and you're wrong, it's going to tarnish your reputation. And I think you can't be upset with people for then coming back to you and be like, well, actually, no, you got this very wrong. When you do, you should accept that and hold your hands up.
Yeah, well, it's looking likely that as they could be going. We don't know yet. The replacements being touted, Khannous and Tzolis, I'm guessing how you say it, Tzolis. So that'll be interesting. I guess the rumours before that were like, it's basically like most of our targets to replace Eze have been taken, the big ones, and we're kind of further down the pecking order. No matter the quality of the two, it does feel like that because we had the links to McAtee and Doy, all of that, and they've kind of gone elsewhere. So, Eze going, we need the big enough money for him, and yeah, the replacing is going to be hard, and it feels like a horrible time for us to try and replace Eze because of the timing. Like we play in Europe in 3 days, and then we play at home 3 days after that, and then we're back the week after in an away game. So it's a really weird time for us. As well as Eze, still no more signings. Depth's not looking as good at the moment, and Glasner clearly doesn't favour any attackers on our bench apart from Devaney. Only the two subs made v Chelsea, and that was a big difference. Them last 20 minutes, Chelsea were on top because they brought on better players and they had that squad depth. Mate, it's obviously important we see proper movement. On a signing or two, but like it's got to be this week, right? We got to have someone through the door this week.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the situation, from what I understand, is that if Eze goes, we will make 2 or 3 good signings. There's supposedly people lined up to come in, whether that be El Khannous, whether that be Crystal Solis, or somebody else. What I would say as well is that if Eze doesn't go, which could happen, we don't know. It might be the case that he doesn't go. Um, the incomings will be minimal fees, such as Sosa's signing fee and a loan, and that's the reality of it. I think if Ebbs goes, it's a decent amount of money, and I think and I mentioned this earlier on Twitter that you can't. You're not gonna. It's similar with Elise. You're not gonna replace the player, but you can go some way to replacing the output. And for me, bringing in El Khannous and Solis would replace that output. And we saw the same with bringing in Sarr. It's not going to replace Elise as a player, but it can replace the output. And ultimately, if the output's better, if not the same, it kind of makes up for losing the player. It doesn't really matter, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a really weird line we're in because that starting 11 we've currently got, as proven by our last 10 games with no losses against the likes of Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, Spurs in there, Arsenal in there as well, undefeated. It just shows how good this starting 11 is, combined with, I would say, Lerma, Devaney, and Kamada as well as the starting 11 that played against Chelsea. You've got that 14 players who are very, very good. And I would say add Sosa in there as well if you needed to. But it's that start 11 is so good. And it's like the battle right now is because we are apparently either skint or a cash flow issue, however they want to say it, but we can't spend. So you either sacrifice losing arguably one of the most enjoyable players to watch in your history and one of the best who's created the best moment in our history in Eze, and you have to go down this whole finance argument, which is sadly the way football's going, or you take that risk and you go only sign minimum. And I'm guessing, Henry, would you side with selling SA right now, no matter how hard that
It's
sounds?
hard. It's hard, but and I like what you're saying, but we had the same with Zaha, and we eventually replaced him. We've had the same with Elise. We replaced him. We'd had the same with Eze, and if he goes, we will replace him, and that's the thing. You know, these players come and go, and that's how it is in football. We all know that. But there's always someone else, and there's always someone that can come in. Who knows? El Khannous could come in and be an absolute superstar. He's raw. He's young, relatively, and I think he's not the finished product by any means. But I think he could come in and make a difference. I think Tzolis, European experience, European pedigree. He's a good player. Lots of goals. I think 16 goals, 9 assists last year. And in the league, 3 goal contributions in the Champions League, and then also he scored twice in Club Brugge's first 4 games this year in the Pro League. So you can replace these players, and in 5 years' time, I'm sure we'll be talking about another player that we don't want to lose and has had a massive impact on the club. Yes, Eze's is undeniable and is clear to see with the FA Cup win and the performances on the way to that victory. But this is the thing about football. We all know it, and it's also why we love it. That it's changing, it's different, and there's always something around the corner that you don't expect. So yeah, I think, like I said, it's not a case of replacing the player. You're never going to replace him. He's done so much on and off the pitch at Palace, and I'm sure we're going to hold a very special place with him for the rest of his career and the rest of his life. But what you can do is replace the output, and if we can do that successfully, then it's a win-win for me, because you either keep one of the best players at your club, or you sell him and you bring in, 2, 3, maybe even 4 new players that can, make their own legacies.
Yeah, massively agree. It's going to be depressing, that's for sure. But it's sadly the way football is. Um, the latest as we're recording this pod, is Club Bruges are trying to push out that they see Solis as 100% non-transferable, non-sellable, or whatever, no matter the offer on the table. They are apparently rejecting all negotiation attempts at this current time. Be interesting to see how that plays out. And then on El Khannous, he's apparently told Leicester that he wants to leave for Crystal Palace. So let me bring one more debate for you, Henry. El Khannous, if he's the only kind of player to come in that 10 role to replace Eze, is that enough?
No, no, not at all. I mean, we need extra bodies now, even with Eze, like you said. And I think you raised a really valid point there, and an important point. that Glasner doesn't clearly trust any of the attackers on the bench. I wouldn't class Justin Devenny as an attacker. I think he's better suited in midfield, where his energy is a lot better used. And therefore, by that logic, if Eze leaves, we then need even more players in. So no, if Eze goes, just bring in Bilal El Khannous will not be enough. And I'd be very disappointed if that's all we did. But to be honest, I don't think it is. I don't think we'll be selling Eze without having 2 to 3 options lined up and ready to come in. Just quickly on what you said about Tzolis with Club Brugge. Every club's going to say that. I'm pretty sure at one point Leicester were saying that they weren't going to sell El Khannous. There's probably been times when we said the same about our players. That doesn't mean that they're not, attainable. It just means that the club doesn't want to sell them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the hard thing for us, as I said earlier, we lost some of our possible replacements, but it's just because Spurs have not been wanting to sign Eze, and you can't bring in these players unless they're like a bigger drop in quality than the ones we want now. You can't bring them in if you kind of keep an Eze, because I guess some of them you're telling them they're going to be the key player. So it's a really annoying transfer window saga at the moment, I think. And yeah, the big thing as well, if it was just El Khannous, is obviously him and Sarr both go to AFCON, African Cup of Nations. So that is literally all the evidence you need to say we need more than one to replace Eze. And yeah, I back you as well. I do think hopefully we'd bring in at least 2 kind of attackers if Eze was to leave, which it sounds like there's talks again today between Palace and Eze. But we'll move on from then players. Marc Guehi at the end of the Chelsea game as well. I think it's been taken a little bit out of proportion, but can understand why people were bringing it up. But obviously, I'll just quickly say Guehi did clap the fans at the end, did go all the way to the fans, left a bit earlier than most of the other players. And then the clip Sky Sports plugged out was Glasner trying to shout Marc's name, I'm guessing to get him to continue clapping, and he didn't. And I don't know. I said I personally don't see it as that much of a big deal, because I did see him clapping a lot, just like literally as it went to full time. But can you see it from the other angle as well, mate?
Not really. I think it's just an attempt at creating an issue out of nothing. You've got to remember that, and Roy Keane said this, and I don't normally agree with him, but he kind of said, this is a player that's just, exerted himself physically for 110 minutes. He's absolutely shattered. He has gone over to the fans. And the only thing that I guess you could say was that Glasner shouts him over, he looks at him and then just ignores him and walks off. And you kind of see Glasner appear to go to Mateta and kind of say, what's up with Marc? Obviously, I'm guessing what was said. But no, I don't think it's a massive issue. I don't know if that means anything. I think it's easy to read into, especially when we're all on edge. And I think that's probably why they highlighted it, because it's obviously going to get engagement from us, from Liverpool fans, from Forest fans, because they love laughing at us at the moment. And, it's just one of those where I think if you were to, microscopically analyse every scenario that happens, like with Eze leaving the stadium, and really unprofessionally, in my opinion, the Sky Sports reporter just goes, "So you off to Tottenham then, mate?" That's not very. I don't think that's okay. But Eze completely ignored him. But apparently, that means he's off, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what that interpreted. Completely ignoring someone. But you learn something new every day. But that just further proves the point that people read way too much into everything, especially during the transfer window, because, like I said, everyone's on edge. Everybody's anticipating things happening. Everybody wants things to happen or doesn't want things to happen. So it creates a massive frenzy that, to be honest, I don't think needs to exist.
Yep, massively agree. And I guess apart from that, the 2 attacking midfielder links, that's kind of been it at the moment. So transfer roundup kind of done there. We're in for some attackers at the moment. No one else is kind of close. So we'll have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But let's move on to some more exciting stuff and chat about Europe, mate, because that's what Crystal Palace do these days. They win trophies and they play in Europe. And obviously, our first ever European game is around the corner. Well, our first ever Europa Conference League game is around the corner. Playoff, we have to get through 2 legs. First leg is at home. How are you feeling for the game, mate?
Yeah, I can't go, unfortunately, because I am working. So I'm going to have to try and time my break to watch it. And I might just be naughty and take an extra long break so I can watch the whole game. We'll have to wait and see. But how I'm feeling, relaxed. I guess. Obviously excited. It's going to be nice to watch Palace in the Europa League, Conference League. Need to keep reminding myself and catching myself out there. But no, I'm confident. I think everybody should be confident. This is a side that were, I believe, semi-pro or 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. So I think from seeing there's a guy on Twitter that supports Spurs and Fredrikstad, who I've become familiar with over the last week or so, and he's essentially just saying, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a whitewash, to be honest. I think, yes, we need to get players in if Eze leaves, but I don't think you need to rush to get them in before this game. Being at home, first leg is helpful. I think you could build a decent cushion. And I think the only thing I would say is that you'd want to come away from that game with maybe a 4 or 5 goal cushion, purely because it just, eradicates any feeling of doubt going to Oslo next week. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be exciting. I'm excited to see the Conference League badge on the shirt, because my hot take is that badge is actually nicer than the Europa League badge. I think it looks a lot nicer on shirts. There's something about the green that does it for me.
I do like the green, but I've got really sad news for you, mate. They don't wear it in the playoffs.
Well, that's a shame. I'm going to have to wait, aren't I? I'm going to have to wait.
TV off. You're going to have to hopefully wait.
That's it. I'm not
yeah.
watching it now. I'm not going to watch. I don't care. I was only here for the badge.
I tweeted about it, and I was like, when are they going to put the patch on the shirts in the shop or whatever? And then someone was like, yeah, I don't think they wear them. And they showed me a picture of Chelsea in the playoff last season, and they didn't. And it's a thing. So depressingly, we still won't see that European badge in it, which is just annoying. Just annoying.
Yeah, but I mean, we did say though, didn't we? Well, especially me, that if we this is before the CAS ruling had come to a conclusion, but I said multiple times that if we don't beat Fredrikstad, we don't deserve to be in the Conference League, and that's not said with any disrespect necessarily towards them or the competition, but it is, in my opinion, is just the harsh reality of the situation. We should be winning.
Yeah, we've got, and I agree with you. We've got to have a really comfortable lead going into the Fredrikstad. I think it's on an artificial pitch as well, and it's them little things, first European game away from home. You need to be comfortable before you get there. I actually am quite happy we got the first leg at home as well. I think because not only it's meant that our first 3 games are still in London, which I think has been actually really crucial with a small squad. But just, so we can hopefully set off a really, really good advantage and get a few goals and be strong. If Eze's gone, I'm guessing it'll be one of Edouard or Deveni or someone in there to just fill in. But it's exciting, and it's going to be a fun game. I don't really think there's much else we need to talk about Fredrikstad, but I was just thinking, because obviously we got a game straight after that as well. Forest at home, mate. They won 3-1 against Brentford. This game's, I'm pretty excited for. I think you should have small rivalries like this. Like it gives it something, It gives it something. It gives you a bit more excitement to go there. The atmosphere should be good. But are you feeling like at all confident for that game as well?
Well, just before I get onto that, I think ultimately that's how the rivalry between Palace and Brighton started.
Yeah.
Not obviously the exact same, but a dispute and a hatred between 2 managers. And somehow that's how these things come about. Forest, seem to love making enemies, and that's fine, good for them. But they played really well against Brentford. I was really impressed. Not so much with Brentford. I think they're poor, and I put them in the same category as West Ham in terms of being in great danger, in terms of potentially going down, especially with how good Sunderland looked. But no, Forest were good. They were dynamic, and Doy scoring on his debut. That's always good for an attacker. It kind of gets him into the flow, and it's going to be a hard game because Chris Wood does love scoring against us, and he got a brace on the opening weekend, and people there were murmurs that maybe he'd had enough and he wasn't quite up to it anymore, but that doesn't seem to be the case. We'll just have to wait and see. Forest are a good team. I think Elliot Anderson for me would be the player to watch out for, because I think he's just absolutely fantastic. Carries the ball so well. I mean that through ball. I think it was first time through ball to Chris Wood for his second goal when he rounded the goalkeeper. It's just unbelievable technique. So it's going to be a hard game, obviously, with all the added bite that will come with it. I'm excited to see whether Marinakis can, 1, attend the game, and 2, whether he can fit through the turnstiles. I'm of course joking. He'll probably go through the offices, but no, I'm excited. I think the fallout. I think if we win, it's going to be a good night on Twitter. If we lose, it's going to be probably still a good night on Twitter because it will be very busy and very lively. And yeah, I mean, exciting atmosphere as well. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, and for me, I think the one big issue we have compared to them is this just I feel like a broken record, but it's just the squad depth. If we're not winning 60 minutes in, or we're not draw, or we're losing 60 minutes in, then I do worry because they're just going to go, look, we either need the goal, we need to shut up shop, and we can do that. We can bring on McAtee or whatever. We can bring on these new signings. They signed someone else today as well. So their squad's going to be really huge, and I just think we've got to unsettle them early doors. We have a great starting 11. We really, really do. Um, so I think that's the game we need an Eze replacement in for if he is to go. And it's
But
going to be
that
a bit gutting if we lose him for that.
100%, but also that squad depth. I think we saw that at Stamford Bridge, to be honest, because we were on
Yeah.
top for large parts of the game, and then the last kind of 15, 20 minutes or so, I'd say probably from 75 onwards towards the end of the game, it was all Chelsea. And I think that does come down to the fact that we just don't have bodies to bring on. We don't have players. We do obviously have players to bring on. They're sat on the bench, but not players that Glasner trusts or believes in, or players that he thinks can come in and make a difference. And I think that maybe, in a sense, I can't remember if I said this earlier, but I think that could be a sort of message to the board that, I'm not happy with the squad. We know he's not happy, but, excuse me, for him to be able to kind of prove that. And, yeah, against someone like Forest, when they can bring on Carlo Mwendo, who they've just signed, McAtee, Hutchinson, they've got crazy amount of depth. And it is a bit worrying, and I do fear that if we don't improve on the depth that we have, that we may well lose a lot of points in the last 20, 25 minutes of games when we're not able to make those changes.
Yeah, massively, massively agree. It's a big week coming up. Um, and we're just gonna have to see how it goes. See how it goes. Hopefully, we get a few wins in there. I would take a draw from Forest at this current time, especially with Europe either side of them. That's just so important we get through that, because we can, as we showed end of last season, we can drop points at the start and be okay. But yeah, just a loss is off the cards, please, lads. If you're listening, ever, please do not lose that match because that will be horrible. But we've covered a lot there today. That's about it for that. If you aren't already, be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow if you're listening on Spotify. This is still weekly podcast, so we will be bringing you this every week. So it'll be the Forest Fallout next week, as well as our first leg of Europe, which is crazy to even say again. But that's been all for today, and we'll see you later.